People always complain when they don't follow their intuition. Your intuition isn't an emotional thought. In my experience, at least, I would always get confused between intuition and impulse. I was never able to distinguish the two. Over time, I realized that my impulses were decisions I wanted to make based on my emotional state at that time. My intuition was the polar opposite. It came from my subconscious. It used the information I stored in my subconscious to help me make my decisions. When I realized this, the question I then asked myself was, how do I improve my intuition? Since intuition comes from the subconscious mind, I wanted to see if I could improve the value of the information that was stored in there. I decided that reading was one way to increase my quality of information. I began to read books that seemed interesting. Over time, I just grew curious, so I started expanding my interest in many different genres. For example, I was curious about how I should improve my storytelling, so I decided to get into fantasy books. I started reading the Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson and noticed how much I was missing out on. I wasn't only learning from these authors, I was seeing the world from their perspective and making connections with past experiences in my life. Allowing myself to be curious made anything I read a lot more interesting, which then made me intensely more focused in my productivity, which then allowed me to store the information in my subconscious without me ever realizing. One other thing I noticed that writing also increased the value of my subconscious. At first, I wouldn't know what to write about. I just timed myself and wrote gibberish for about 10 minutes. I did that for a while, then switched to writing about my problems. I would then also try to summarize what I read to see if I can improve my memory. This solidified an opening in my subconscious to store the right information. And I say this because writing my thoughts down cured the madness that was going on in my head. It seemed like it went away after some time, but I believe writing it just eliminated the unnecessary thoughts and transferred the important ones to my subconscious. My intuition over time was improving, but one problem I kept dealing with was when to trust it. I always hesitated. I started questioning whether I was right or wrong. I didn't know how to solve this problem until I started believing in myself. I built up enough courage to live with the decisions I've made, and if that meant trusting my intuition, I was all for it. Everything started to make sense. Courage was the key to making the right decision. Relying on my intuition made life simple. Who was to say my decisions were rational? It didn't need to be, as long as it made sense to me. This is not to be ignorant of the opinions of others, of course, but to understand that everyone sees the world differently. But if I try to fix my eyes to the way everybody sees things, I'll go blind. I was finally able to trust myself. I wasn't thinking too much anymore. I learned that reading and writing improved my intuition, so I made sure that I continued to practice in those areas. I stayed curious, I stayed interested. I decided to look up to these authors and try to apply some of the knowledge to my life. I practiced in order to stay sharp. Miyamoto Musashi once said, "You can only fight the way you practice." So I'm confident at tackling life because I realized that confidence comes from knowing oneself. I put the work in to know that my intuition is the only way to make sense of this world. And with that said, the role of a man is to follow his intuition, build up enough knowledge so it can be stored in the subconscious, and have the confidence to rely on it. A man is defined by his actions, but how can he act if he's indecisive? Learn to spark interest in whatever you're doing. Pay close attention, listen, practice the art of practice, and learn to just have fun with it. Don't simmer down to hesitation because fate will eventually make the decisions for you, and you may not like it. So follow your intuition. Fuck.